Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Mr. President, Excellencies, the path to peace must be walked with patience. To achieve any purpose with others, be they powers or people, patience is needed. The opposite of patience is impatience, the cause and aggravation of conflict. Someone said that talk is better than war. Listening is even better than talking. We must listen to others more than we listen to ourselves. Hopefully, we know that we are talking about, but others may know what we do not know. We can learn only if we stop talking and listen. We may think we know how others can do things better than they've done it. Maybe our way is more efficient, but the time gained by that efficiency will be time lost convincing others that our way is better, rather than a compromise between our way and theirs. Real change in the world order necessitates cooperation. Nothing affecting others can be undertaken without their willing involvement, without getting their agreement on the purpose and the manner of it. Achieving a shared purpose beyond any single one's ability requires the ability to cooperate or cooperation. But how else can we get cooperation if not with the patience to explain why it is needed and the equal patience to listen? This is why we have the United Nations, the largest cooperative endeavor in human history. We use the United Nations to speak out, but more importantly, to listen, and somehow arrive at a consensus, or at the very least, a modus vivendi on how to proceed, in peace and therefore with greater prospect of progress. The theme for this session, focusing on people, striving for peace and a decent life for all on a sustainable planet, captures a promise that everyone who has stood here vowed to fulfill to his own people and the rest of the peoples of the United Nations, as the preamble of the Charter puts it. Yet, after 72 years, while much had been achieved, much more has to be done. The promise is still very much a work in progress. We, the people of the United Nations, battle new threats that undermine such success as we have achieved and frustrate further progress in peace, development, and human rights, the three pillars of the United Nations. Your theme, Mr. President, mirrors the Philippines' own people-centered agenda as articulated by our President, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. President Duterte and the Filipino people are committed to real change, tunay na pagbabago, to finally carry out long-needed reforms to addressing the national threats long ignored, protecting the human rights of all Filipinos, while doing our part in attaining regional peace and stability. We remain true to our obligation under the international treaties we have ratified. We have made much sacrifices as a nation and as a people, and we will continue to make that sacrifices for peace and prosperity. The Philippines integrates the human rights agenda in its development initiatives for the purpose of protecting everyone, especially the most vulnerable, from the lawlessness, violence, and anarchy, particularly families, women and children, the poor, indigenous people, migrant workers, the elderly, and persons with disabilities. That is why we have a massive campaign to restore the rule of law by fighting corruption, crime, and illegal drugs. We owe it to the 10 million Filipinos working overseas to keep their children and their families safe. We owe it to all Filipino families to keep the Philippines safe. We owe it to you to keep your nationals who are in the Philippines safe. The very principle of responsibility to protect must encompass, first and foremost, the vast majority of peaceful, law-abiding people who must be protected from those who are not. It is for their safety and sustenance that states exist and for which governments and leaders are responsible. President Duterte said the fewest words, made the least promises during the campaign. Why? Because he listened. He listened and he heard what none of the other candidates would listen to. The vast majority of the Filipino people felt vulnerable in their lives and livelihoods, unsafe in the rising drug-driven criminality that threatened those least able to protect themselves. They were also those past governments had least protected, the poor and ordinary folk. The Philippines' comprehensive campaign against illegal drugs is a necessary instrument to preserve and protect the human rights of all Filipinos. It is never an instrument to violate any individual's or group's human rights. It was noted in this hall that all sovereign nations must uphold two sovereign obligations: to respect the interests of their own people and the sovereignty of other nations. This is true as much in bilateral relations between sovereign countries as when they combine multilaterally on some common decision or action. The Philippines is a sovereign country. Indeed, it was the first subject nation to win its independence, however short-lived, thereby earning the honor of being the first republic in Asia. Our people expects, that the sovereignty be respected and that its democratically elected government's assessment of threats and how to go about addressing them shall be accorded preeminence among nations. Or at the very least, is it too much to ask for the benefit of the doubt? We prize sovereignty in all of its aspects. We acknowledge the wisdom and borrow the words here spoken in this great hall. All responsible leaders have an obligation to serve their own citizens first. In keeping with that obligation, it is the state's duty to protect human life, human dignity, and human rights from aggression by other states, terrorism from non-state actors, and destruction of societies and families from criminal networks, trafficking in drugs, people, and arms. As a responsible leader, the Philippine President launched a vigorous campaign against the illegal drug trade to save lives, to preserve families, to protect communities, and to stop the country from sliding into a narco state. An epidemic that would spell the end of sovereignty in any meaningful sense. As of August 2017, the drug trade has penetrated at least 24,848 barangays. This is at least 59% of the total of 42,036 of the smallest government units spanning our archipelago, the ones directly in touch with our people. It's estimated that 4 to 7 million people have been using drugs or are becoming dependent upon drugs. Where is sovereignty in a country where vast numbers are addicted to drugs and are enslaved to their suppliers? To be sure, drug addiction calls for cure and not chastisement. When the President showed his fierce determination to end the drug menace, 1.3 million drug users turned in themselves. Their constitutional rights were fully respected, and those who wanted a cure or rehabilitation were offered such. But the neglect of the drug problem by previous governments have left the current one hard-pressed to rehabilitate them all. We are thankful that generous souls at home and abroad are building centers around the country. Maraming salamat po. Thank you for all those who are helping. While drug addiction calls for rehabilitation, drug trafficking surely calls for stern measures, though always consistent with the rule of law. The President has and will always have zero tolerance for abusive cops. Time will show this, and may I repeat, our President has a zero tolerance for any kind of abuse. Drug abuse, abuse of human rights, abuse of our laws, or abuse by state actors or abuse by our policemen. But accusations before investigation is not proof, nor is it fair. Abuses have occurred and mistakes have been made, tragic ones for sure. While one abuse is one too many, still the abuses are far less than the imaginary numbers of partisan accusers and publicity seekers. The drug trade has penetrated even law enforcement and even our courts. And yet, we are getting a message that the best way to stop abuse in the anti-drug campaign is to stop the campaign and live with drugs instead. But we cannot live with drugs because drugs will not let us live. Headlines today about human rights abuses. But what about the headlines yesterday, the other day, last week, wherein 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 6-year-olds were being raped, wherein mothers were selling their children to feed their drug addiction, wherein children were shooting their parents because they thought they were the devil. The problem is, the West sometimes thinks that the kind of drugs that are present in their society, heroin, cocaine, and marijuana, are the same drugs that we are talking about. We are talking about methamphetamine hydrochloride, or shabu, which the UN itself and the WHO has said is associated with violence and paranoia. With cocaine, heroin, and marijuana, the drug war is between the suppliers. But with methamphetamines, the war is within the family. And every family affected by these drugs is a family that is a victim. We can no more live with drugs than with terrorism, which the United Nations admits, and as we have discovered, is funded by the drug trade. This has created the new phenomenon of criminal insurgency. In the century before last, a huge and well-populated Asian country was enslaved by a maritime power which flooded it with drugs. We welcome this opportunity to address the international community's concern and correct perceptions gleaned from media reports that deny the real scale of the problem as if denial is a solution. The problem is huge, and we will not reduce it to our imagination because we dare not face it in reality. Appeasement emboldens evil. We counsel patience, but delay will make the problem bigger until it is beyond containment and control. Indeed, as we have heard in this hall, when decent people and nations become bystanders, the forces of destruction only gather power and strength. We will not slide down the slope of complacency and of the willful ignorance of the threat to our country and to our people posed by the drug trade. In the past 4 years, we have seen the rise of the Islamic State and how it has spread its nihilistic ideology beyond Iraq and Syria to become a serious threat to the whole world. We should hold no illusion that the threat posed by the Islamic State will be over with the collapse of its self-proclaimed caliphate in Iraq and very soon in Syria. Rather, we should all be ready to confront a very potent threat that has spread to other parts of the world. In the Philippines, we have discovered the intimate and symbiotic relationship between terrorism, poverty, and the illegal drug trade. These terrorists were somehow able to bring together an assortment of extremists, criminals, mercenaries, and foreign fighters who attempted to, but failed to take over the great city of Marawi. This was part of their grand plan to establish in Southeast Asia an extension or a province of their shattered caliphate in the Middle East. The armed forces of the Philippines shall regain full control of Marawi from the Islamic State-inspired terrorists. Their protracted hold on their last several square meters of the city is largely a result of superior arms illegally obtained and the presence of civilian hostages used by them as human shields. There is also the government's forbearance to unleash greater force so as to avoid collateral loss of life. The fight has been terrible, but the effort has been patient and done with care to spare the innocent. There's been less talk and more listening to those with the most at stake in the struggle, the people of Marawi. This disturbance will be over soon, and the rebuilding of Marawi will begin shortly. Terrorism is a global problem that no country can tackle alone. although here at the UN it was noted with some admiration that Filipino families outside the conflict zone quickly absorbed most of the 200,000 displaced civilians. Our main disaster preparedness is the Filipino compassion. The Filipino family system is strong, the bayanihan system is alive, and cooperation is a Philippine tradition. Help from fellow Filipinos is always at hand. While the main burden is borne out by government and the people, and all risks are taken by our soldiers, we are thankful for such assistance as the international community has extended. To all of you who have helped, are continuing to help, and have promised help, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you very much. Thank you, dear friends, for helping when we needed it most. The Philippines welcomes the creation of the United Nations Counterterrorism Office to bring into a cohesive whole the work on counterterrorism by member states and the United Nations. It will be a sharing of experience and sober reflection rather than of blind anxieties. That way lies real results. As a founding member of the United Nations, the Philippines have been a strong advocate of the rule of law. We uphold the core of the UN mission to draw upon the strength and sovereignty, equality of its members to achieve their common goals. Mr. President, centuries ago, the ambition for land to take invited long and terrible wars. The battle has shifted to the seas. Hence, the need to affirm our commitment to UNCLOS as the international law governing rights and responsibilities of states, parties in their use of the world's oceans. The issues are no doubt numerous, intertwined, and complex. Territorial claims, sovereignty rights, security, protection of marine life and resources, to name a few. Dialogue, building trust, and promoting cooperation to address these issues of concerns is the way forward in addressing maritime disputes. The Philippines, as chair of ASEAN this year, looks forward to the successful negotiations of the long overdue Code of Conduct in the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea. We thank fully our ASEAN neighbors, the ASEAN individual states, and China for their utmost cooperation in this endeavor. Again, in this work, patience, a lot of listening, and willingness to work with rather than against each other is essential. We live in a global community and we are citizens of the world. Today, our social contract is no longer confined to our nation state. In our region, we exert efforts to build bridges and not walls, to emphasize commonalities and not differences, to think that we are less Filipinos, Thais, Indonesian, Vietnamese, Japanese, Koreans, Chinese, and think more of ourselves as Asians. Beyond being Asians, we are global citizens, the people of the United Nations. Human rights and the dignity of every person is the main pillar of the United Nations. So it is for the Philippines. As a very spiritual people, we are united in believing that man and woman were created in God's image, that there can be no compromise on human rights of those who break the law, and surely too of those who are their victims. We also believe in accountability, not least in the practical conviction that as we sow, so shall we reap. We should never tolerate human rights abuses, but neither should we tolerate misinformation, fake news on, and politicization of human rights, for this undermines our collective efforts at the United Nations to uphold the universality of human rights and the dignity of life. But why debate security versus human rights? Security and human rights are not incompatible. Indeed, the first is our duty to the other. Without security, the most basic human right to life and safety are constantly under attack from terrorism, criminality, drug and human trafficking. Much have been said about the ASEAN. Words like cooperation consultation, and consensus are identified with it. Critics have remarked on the slowness of ASEAN's way of proceeding. Yet, slow as ASEAN progress has been, the progress has been solid, substantive, and irreversible, precisely because of the patience with which it was made, thereby providing the consensus-based organization that is working and working well. 5 decades ago, Southeast Asia was marred by conflict, and all previous attempts at Southeast Asian regionalism proved extremely difficult, if not impossible to some. Our different cultures, our differing ideologies, different political system only reinforce these pessimistic outlooks. 50 years hence, ASEAN miracle prevails with great political and economic prospects that have gripped the world or the global interest. ASEAN has overcome the divisions, the fears, the hostilities of the past. We have used regional cooperation to promote growth, development, integration, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. Today, the Philippines patiently builds stronger relations with the international community. Through the ASEAN and the great United Nations, we remain a friend to all, an enemy to none. We are here to bridge, to build a more peaceful, secure, and stable world. There's no development without peace, and no peace without development. This is what the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development provides. It serves as the template for the Philippine development plan called Ambition Natin 2040, or Our Ambition 2040. While the Philippines have experienced unprecedented economic growth, we are adopting measures to make growth more inclusive by massive poverty alleviation programs, creating more jobs, driving innovation, making quality education universally available, relevant education that imparts training and skill building to make people resilient in the changing markets, building a greater trust in government and hope for the result of raising tens of millions of Filipinos from poverty. There is a link between increasing poverty, corruption, and a deteriorating environment. President Rodrigo Roa Duterte seeks to reverse this linkage by addressing the adverse effect of climate change, to which the Philippines is most vulnerable, through disaster risk reduction and through strict implementation of laws protecting the environment. Yes, he is equally decisive in abuses that damage our environment. To honor the immense sacrifices of our 10 million Filipinos abroad and all other migrant workers of the world making huge sacrifices so that their families may have a better life, we press on with our advocacy of Global Compact on Migration as we seek to improve conditions for foreign nationals living and working in the Philippines. We advocate the fundamental concept of loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. We call on the UN to elevate migration on its agenda. If we listen to each other, we will hear the same thing. We have no need for nuclear weapons. Again, we have no need for nuclear weapons. There is absolutely no benefit in another war, in another Cold War, neither in an arms race. We want nuclear weapons to be a thing of the past, and we do not want an arms race in any part of the world. On July 7, the Philippines joined 121 other member states in securing our world from weapons of mass destruction by adopting the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. 3 days ago, I had the privilege of signing for the Philippines the treaty. The Philippines calls on the member states with nuclear weapons to likewise sign on, to find a way to give the world security, but to give it without the threat of mass destruction. We can only have a safe world if we get rid of all nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction. By doing so, we save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind. To the Philippines, on its own and as the chair of this year's ASEAN, has expressed its grave concern over the growing tensions in the Korean Peninsula. Because of the DPRK's missile test launches and detonations, the Philippines joins the call on DPRK to put a stop on its provocations, which bring us closer to an unimaginable scenario. A war to end all wars, because no one will be left to fight new ones. Let me end where I began and call for patience, for listening, for cooperation, focused always on the well-being of, to quote the Charter's preamble, we, the people of the United Nations. Let us listen to each other as we are all the people of the United Nations. Our fate, our destiny as human beings are in this planet are intertwined. In a situation like the present, where every finger in and around the Korean Peninsula is on a trigger, every eye is out for a wrong move, the likelihood of a surprise attack is virtually nil or zero. In that situation, no one can be caught by surprise and unprepared to strike back. So what is there to lose? By going on talking and listening, talking and listening, talking and listening until the very last moment, in the hope that a resolution be found. Patience, listening, as much as talking, cooperation among friends and even enemies, these are the signposts of the path of peace. Peace is about people. No people and no country can have a national identity if there are no others who can tell the difference. Without peoples, each one different yet all the same in their being and in the good they seek, it is impossible to imagine the world. To utter the phrase "the world" means a planet with many peoples sharing it. All of us are pieces of a giant puzzle. We seek to be completed by being pieced together, thereby creating a whole, a beautiful picture. In a war of all against all, of every each against the other, the last man standing is not at peace, but he is simply a single piece. He is not the victor, he is alone. Thank you, Mr. President. Congratulations on your election, and you can count on the support of the Philippines. Your Excellencies, magandang hapon, good afternoon to all of you.
I thank the Secretary for Foreign Affairs of the Philippines for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency
CNN Philippines. In the news, authorities are urging members of the Aegis Juris Fraternity to clear their name in the hazing death of UST student Horacio Castillo III. It's a battle against fake news, or so says Senator Antonio Trillanes as he takes his fight with Communications Assistant Secretary Mocha Uson to the Ombudsman. And the Kardashians are expecting a new addition to their growing family, and that's courtesy of Kylie. Good afternoon, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Thanks for joining us. As the investigation into the death of hazing victim Horacio Castillo deepens, authorities are urging other Aegis Juris Fraternity members to come clean. Our Rex Remitio is monitoring this developing story. He is at the Manila Police District joining us live. Rex, what's the latest in the investigation?
John Paul Solano, a primary suspect in the hazing of Horacio Castillo III, is still detained at the Manila Police Headquarters. Yesterday, he underwent booking and medical procedures. The police also took his fingerprints, mugshots, and other relevant information. MPD spokesperson Erwin Margarejo says that Solano is safe and alone in his detention cell. His meals are also regular. The police is also waiting for his new sworn statement as it could reveal details on what happened on the night of Castillo's death.
If nakalagay doon sa statement is his only participation, that he is only providing medical assistance as a medical provider, well, wala pong malaking breakthrough yun.
That's why the Manila Police is encouraging other frat members to come clean, just like Solano and Aaron Salientes, a person of interest in the case who surfaced at the National Bureau of Investigation last night. The police say if other frat members are involved in the crime, they have to be accountable. But now is their chance to clear their name. Mai.
Rex, are there other ways for the suspects or persons of interest to surrender?
The Justice Department has launched the DOJ Horacio Hotline for those who are involved or have relevant information into the hazing incident. The DOJ Horacio Hotline is 0995-442-9241. Again, that's 0995-442-9241. Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre says they can assure the safety of those who will come to his office, and he also offered to place them under the Witness Protection Program. Mai.
Rex, what about this person of interest that you mentioned, Aaron Salientes? You said he turned himself over to the NBI. What's his status now?
Aaron Salientes was allowed to go home because he's only a person of interest and not a suspect into the incident. But he is encouraged to participate in the ongoing investigation. Mai.
Rex, Aaron said that he has CCTV footage to prove that he wasn't in the welcoming rites or the hazing rites for Asho Castillo. Has this been proven? What did the police say about this?
I think it will be part of the police investigation to verify the authenticity of those security camera footage. But Salientes showed us these footages that he was not at the place where the hazing incident happened. That's why he had shown us these security camera footages. Mai.
Okay, Rex Remito there reporting from the Manila Police District. John Paul Solano clarifies his involvement in the death of Castillo. Solano, a medical technologist, says he was called in to revive the law student.
My involvement was to give medical assistance that time.
Specifically, na medical assistance?
Because they were in chaos that time. So I was not there. They need medical assistance. I am a medical health provider. So more or less, they would call me. More or less, he's half. You know what happened. He's half dead. So more or less, I cannot give a final verdict that he's dead because I'm not a doctor that time. So he's unconscious. I did give CPR, and then when I can't do anything else, I brought him to the hospital.
Asho Castillo's family wants primary suspect John Paul Solano to identify all those involved in the hazing rites. They remain suspicious of Solano after he admitted he gave false statements to the police. Solano earlier claimed in his sworn affidavit that he found Asho at a street corner in Tondo, Manila and brought him to the Chinese General Hospital. Meanwhile, Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre went to Castillo's wake last night. He assured the family justice will be served.
Siguro po, pag may isa, dalawa, tatlong testigo, baka po makumpleto na ang picture kung sino talaga ang may kasalanan dito sa krimen na ito.
In other news, Senator Antonio Trillanes brings his battle against Communications Assistant Secretary Mocha Uson to the Office of the Ombudsman. Trillanes says this is only the beginning of his fight against fake news. Anjo Alimario filed this report.
The era of fake news is over. That's according to Senator Sonny Trillanes, who is now going after Communications Assistant Secretary Mocha Uson after supposedly spreading the news that he owns alleged offshore accounts. He wants Uson out of her post and perpetually bar her from public office.
Dahil doon natin siya nahuli, specifically na bogus itong mga accounts na ito at napatunayan natin yan. At inamin na mismo ni Mr. Duterte na nagsisinungaling siya. So, yan ang ating i-file.
In a complaint filed before the Office of the Ombudsman, Trillanes slaps Uson with 3 counts of online libel, grave misconduct, graft, violation of the Code of Ethics, and revised penal code for use of falsified documents. In her Facebook post, Uson explained she used alleged in her posts about Trillanes, but the senator didn't buy her defense.
Well, dito na lang siya sa ombudsman magpaliwanag. Ano? Apparently, kailangan niya ng abogado, yung magagaling na abogado at mabibigat itong kasong i-final natin.
Uson also posted on her social media accounts a countdown waiting for Trillanes to file the complaint against her. She said she's ready to face the charges against her. As for Malacanang,
Well, he's free to do so.
Trillanes warns others who also spread fake news.
So let this be a lesson not only for mismo Kauson, but yung sa mga ordinaryong mga kababayan natin na may penchant na mag-share ng peking news.
Next on Trillanes' list, Erwin Tulfo and Davao Breaking News. Anjo Olimario, CNN Philippines.
Senator Gringo Onasan refuses to enter a plea on his graft cases over his alleged misuse of pork barrel funds. The Sanigan Bayan 2nd Division entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. The anti-graft court proceeded with the arraignment after junking the senator's motions to dismiss the charges, lift his arrest warrant, and defer his arraignment. Onasan, who's out on bail, is facing 2 counts of graft over his alleged misuse of his 30 million peso pork barrel fund. News overseas, Puerto Rico and islands across the Caribbean are reeling from the damage and death brought by Hurricane Maria. CNN's Julie Martin has the latest.
From the CNN Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Julie Martin taking a look here at Hurricane Maria, still a powerful Category 3 storm as it pushes past the Turks and Caicos, starting to interact with the Bahamas. Also, still some flood threats up here in Puerto Rico in the northwestern section and the central section of Puerto Rico, still looking at some major impacts there. Well, when we look at where this is headed, right now our hurricane warnings have been dropped for the islands, but we do have tropical storm warnings in effect in blue here from the Turks and Caicos all the way up into portions of the southeastern Bahamas. Now, Maria is going to push past the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas by tomorrow, though still remaining a Category 1 storm as it spins off the east coast of the United States into next week. When we look at our models here, most of them in pretty good agreement, taking them off the coast of the eastern United States between Bermuda and the U.S. coast. So that is certainly some welcome news. Looking at the models we use most often, the GFS or the American model and the Euro, pretty good agreement here with Maria. However, the GFS does take it a little bit closer here to the Carolina coast before it pushes out to sea. Certainly we are going to see some coastal impacts. We're talking about beach erosion, rough surf throughout the next coming week. When we look at our future radar here, pushing past Turks and Caicos and Bahamas by tomorrow evening and then continuing to move northward over the next 48 hours. That's a look at this forecast. I'm Julie Martin, CNN.
Moving on to lighter news, in the world we know as Kardashian, a new little star will soon be the center of attention. Two sources close to the family reveal Kylie Jenner is expecting her first child. Sources say the 20-year-old reality star is due in February. The father is 25-year-old rapper Travis Scott, whom she's been dating since early this year. Kylie stars in her own reality show. She also has her own makeup line and appears in Keeping Up with the Kardashians with the rest of her family. Former child star Camille Prats gives birth to a baby girl. Camille announced the news on Instagram, showing her husband John Yambao carrying their child Nala Camila. In her caption, she thanked the Lord for the gift of life and her husband for being with her every step of the way. This is Camille's second child. She has a 9-year-old son with former husband Anthony Linsangan, who died of cancer in 2011. When the newsroom returns, a person of interest in the hazing death of Horacio Castillo comes forward. He claims to have proof of his innocence. And there's a hub where you can experience Samsung's latest Galaxy products. We tell you where after the break. Keep it here on CNN Philippines. Hello to our viewers on Facebook. Thank you for joining us today. Still our top story, the investigation into the death of Horacio Castillo III, also known as Asho. He was a UST law student who died of hazing from hazing rights, allegedly by the members of the Aegis Juris fraternity. Yesterday, this was a big story as well because of the surrender of the primary suspect, John Paul Solano. Now, what we know about Solano is he is still detained at the Manila Police District, and he has he underwent booking procedures. That's the taking of his mugshot and his fingerprints, and he underwent a medical checkup as well. And we had an update on his situation or his condition at the MPD from Rex Remitio, who reported to us live earlier. And also, Rex had an update for us on the status of this person of interest, Aaron Salientes. He surfaced yesterday. He turned himself into the NBI, and he did show security footage or CCTV footage claiming he was in Pampanga when the hazing rites or the welcoming rites for Asho Castillo happened Saturday night. So he said he wasn't there during that hazing ceremony or hazing rites, and so the police are saying, or Rex was saying, the police allowed Aaron Salientes to go home, but he is still going to be part of the investigation. And also there's a call, of course, for all the members of the Aegis Juris fraternity to also show up, turn themselves in, and give light to this investigation and tell the police what they know about that night. Of course, this was a big story this week when we learned of the death of Asho Castillo. He was found the Chinese General Hospital. He was brought to the Chinese General Hospital, declared dead there because of bruises and signs of hazing. We're going to greet some viewers now. We have time, I think, 20 seconds. Alan Gumila watching from Korea. Beth Umali, hi to you, watching from Singapore. Dayan Descargar watching from Macau. Let us know where you're watching from and what you think of our stories today. Stay tuned. You're in the newsroom on CNN Philippines. Welcome back. The Tomasian community is calling on the suspects in the killing of Horacio Castillo to come forward. On Friday, students and faculty members gathered for a mass at the UST Central Seminary Chapel. They had white ribbons on their shirts to signify their call for justice for Castillo's death. In his homily, Faculty of Arts and Letters Regent, Reverend Father Rodel Aligan prayed that those involved in the crime repent and face the consequences of their actions.
Are praying for the conversion of those Tomasians involved or involved in this criminal activity.
Mabigat po para sa amin lahat ng nangyari. Si Horacio, kaibigan, kapatid, estudyante po namin siya. Minamahal po siya ng mga kablak niya, ng mga tao sa sigilo. Tutulong kami sa lahat ng investigasyon na nangyayari sa paglutas sa kasong Horacio.
One of the persons of interest in Castillo's hazing surfaces. Aaron Salientes showed up at the National Bureau of Investigation and says he is innocent. He claims he wasn't at the hazing rites last Saturday. He even showed CCTV footage to prove that he was in Pampanga. Salientes also denies he is an officer of Aegis Juris fraternity and insists he was not involved in the planning for Castillo's welcoming rites.
Here I am appealing to the nation. I never wanted fame, but especially this way, I have to clear my name. And wala po talaga akong info kung ano man pong nangyayari or ano man po activities nila.
Aside from Salientes, 19 other alleged frat members are under the immigration's lookout order. 2 of them are the primary suspects, Solano and Ralph Tradja, who left the country for Taiwan on Tuesday. The rest are considered persons of interest. troops are gaining more ground in war-torn Marawi City. Sources tell CNN Philippines government forces have recovered Raya Madaya or Mashu Bridge, once controlled by the Maute group. This photo shows the Philippine flag is now hoisted in a building across the bridge near the main battle area. It's the third and final bridge the military has been seeking to control. It traverses Agus River and the one closest to Lake Lanao. Sources say the Philippine Marines now occupy the buildings along the riverside. But troops are now facing more danger as they wind down their operations against Maute fighters in Marawi City. George Cahiles tells us why.
The fighting at the main battle area is now more complicated as government troops confront enemies in the areas where structures are closer to each other. These videos were taken inside the main battle area. The military says around 50 Maute fighters are moving within less than 10 hectares, but their resistance stronger and more intense. Government troops scour all buildings that they occupy to clear it from enemies and homemade bombs.
Pero ngayon na mas dikit-dikit po yung mga structures, mas mahirap na natin ngayon pasukin dahil yun nga po, yung ginagawa ng mga Maute ay binubutas nila yung wall ng isang structure para makalipat sila dun sa kapila.
As of now, 151 soldiers have died while 689 members of Maute ISIS group have been killed in the war. A body of a Maute fighter was recovered early morning Friday. Government forces say there are still around 60 hostages in the area and they are trying their best to rescue them all, just like what happened to Father Chito Soganob. While President Duterte during his visit in Marawi on Thursday says the operations in Marawi is winding down, the local government hopes troops will stay in Marawi even after the Liberation Day.
So that peace and stability in Marawi City will be secured, and once the fighting is over, there will be a semblance of normalcy, an area, a city that is free from possible attacks from terrorist organizations.
With the military around, the local government says the safety and security within the city will be ensured as displaced residents start to rebuild their lives. From Marawi City, George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
Oil giant Petron sells its shares in the Manila North Harbor Port to the International Container Terminal Services Incorporated. In a disclosure to the Philippine Stock Exchange, Petron says it signed the agreement with ICTSI for the sale of over 10 million shares. That's equivalent to nearly 35% of the port's outstanding shares, amounting to 1.75 billion pesos. The completion of the sale purchase deal is still subject to several conditions. Are you still thinking of getting the Note 8? You can go check it out at Samsung's new Techie Playground and experience the product firsthand. Paolo Del Rosario takes us there.
Get ready to commence launching.
Get ready to immerse yourself in a new galaxy. The Samsung Galaxy Studio is now open. And whether you are curious about their new mobile products or are already a loyal Samsung customer, this is the space for you. The Galaxy Studio is a hub nestled in the heart of High Street in Bonifacio Global City. It allows you to experience the technology of Samsung's latest products, such as the Note 8. From an IP68 liquid canvas for you to take selfies underwater, to a Gear VR 4D theater that will take you through a cinematic ride through space. This is a place to test the limits of Samsung's technology.
Samsung is a technology company, but consumers will only really appreciate what tech does when they actually get to experience it. So for us, being able to have the platform to interact with our consumers, let them try our innovations, is the way forward.
And what is a galaxy without stars? Some of the country's most biggest stars came out to play in this techie playground.
We're just really happy to be one of the first to try out this really cool Samsung playground, as I'd like to call it.
I think the most fun for me was the virtual reality. I think it really shows you what the future has in store for us. And you know, it's quite fun, but it's like makes you think also, like, is this what the future holds for us? And there's just so many things to look forward to.
In the coming months, Samsung plans to add more features to the studio that will allow customers to explore the features of the Note 8 and the Samsung Gear 360. But the studio won't be there forever, with the venue closing next year. Until then, though, it is the place to experience Samsung's mobile technology firsthand.
It's going to be here till March, so it's a good way for people who want to get to know Samsung or more Samsung users to experience the products firsthand.
This whole hub here, this whole lab, it really shows the commitment to the lifestyle, because the phone, I think, is probably the most used thing that any of us have. I mean, more than even our cars and more than even our clothes.
The Samsung Galaxy Studio is open from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sundays through Thursdays and 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. Paulo Del Rosario, CNN Philippines.
Still ahead, actress Angel Locsin posts a behind-the-scenes photo with Marian Rivera. Is a movie project in the works for both Darnas. And we give you a sneak peek at Lady Gaga's documentary, now streaming on Netflix. Newsroom Weekend will be back. Stay tuned. Airing the tax reform. I'll tease it on our Facebook. Hello to you guys. Well, I'd like to talk about it. It's we have to educate, inform our viewers. Hello to you guys watching us on Facebook right now. We hope to air this story on the tax reform bill. So Cecil Ardizabal will explain what this train bill means. This is especially for minimum wage earners and middle income earners. As you know, the Senate Ways and Means Committee has approved this proposed tax reform bill, and the government hopes to generate at least 130 billion pesos from this tax reform package. We hope to air this package for you after this break. And also still the big story, the death of UST law student Horacio Asho Castillo III. We're following the investigation into his hazing death. As you know, yesterday, the primary suspect, John Paul Solano, turned himself in, and now he is detained at the MPD, that's the Manila Police District. And but the family of Asho Castillo is hoping for all members of the Aegis Juris fraternity to also turn themselves in and shed light on this case. And they also call on John Paul Solano to tell what he knows and to name the other persons involved in the hazing riots that killed their son. The family is also suspicious of Solano because earlier he made a false statement to the Manila Police District, and he did admit this to the media yesterday when he faced the press. Yet last night, Justice Secretary Vitaliano Aguirre visited the wake of Castillo. He did say baka may isa, dalawa, tatlong testigo ay makumpleto na ang picture kung sino talaga ang may kasalanan sa krimen na ito. That's what the Justice Secretary said. Now, I'd like to say hello to some of our viewers watching us now. Jalu Castaneros, watching from Taiwan. Daya Alas, good day to you. Also, Lucinda Briones Bautista from Barcelona, Spain. Elgin Castillo, he says, hi, Mai. From Chicago, hello to you. And Kuya Tol from California, good evening to you over there. The newsroom's back with more stories. The Senate Ways and Means Committee has approved the proposed tax reform bill. The government hopes to generate at least 130 billion pesos from the tax reform package. Our senior correspondent Cecil Ardizabal explains what the train bill means for minimum wage and middle income earners.
Lorenzo Sacking has something to look forward to in the midst of his hard work. Since he shares expenses with his wife in raising their children, Lorenzo is comforted by the idea that they will have additional savings at home with the proposed tax reform package or the train bill. Aside from the fact that he'll remain income tax exempt as a minimum wage earner, his wife, who earns a little below 25,000 pesos a month, will now be income tax exempt too.
Yung masisave po namin doon siguro, saving for the future na rin po. Kahit ganun po kalit, makakatulong po sa amin yun.
Not only will regular employees get to enjoy the benefit, self-employed and professionals whose gross sales and receipts not exceeding 100,000 pesos a month will also be income tax exempt. They include the farmers, fishermen, sari-sari store and karinderya owners, and market vendors. Part of Sacking's daily expenses are coffee and milk. Coffee and milk will be exempt from tax. coffee meaning ground and 3-in-1 variety, and milk such as plain milk, infant formula, growing up milk, powdered, ready to drink, flavored, and fermented. Natural fruit and vegetable juices, as well as unsweetened tea, will also be tax exempt. A big chunk of Saking's expenses at home goes to the purchase of LPG.
Yung gasol po namin inaabot po ng 3 months. Kung babawasan po nila yon, mas maganda po.
But the tax package will instead have a 6 peso increase in LPG, although the Senate wants it collected in 3 tranches in 3 years. Kerosene won't be taxed since it is widely used as fuel for lighting and cooking. Saking won't be directly affected by the increase in automobile excise tax because his family does not own a car. The Senate version wants the most expensive cars to be taxed much higher. The government hopes to generate 134 billion pesos from the new tax package to fund the administration's infrastructure projects, which the government promises to benefit the likes of Saking and his family. Cecil Ardizabal, CNN Philippines.
In sports, Philippine basketball returns to the international stage. Our sports desk anchor Andre Felix has more.
That's right, my Filipino Cagers are now competing in the FIBA Asia Champions Cup in China. Young guns like Kiefer Ravena, Jet Manuel, and brothers Jeric and Jeron Teng are hitting the hard court against 9 other teams. American big man Isaiah Austin is also cleared to reinforce the Filipino squad, and head coach Chot Reyes is optimistic over what this lineup can bring.
We had injuries, that's why Ray Parks, Kristan Hardinger couldn't make it because of their injuries, their nursing injuries. So that was part of the challenge. But like I said, we're used to this, and I think we have a pretty interesting team.
We have more of the week's top sports stories on Sports Desk Weekend. I'm Andre Felix. Mai, back to you.
Catch Andre after the show at 12:30. A Lady Gaga documentary is now streaming on Netflix. Gaga, 5'2", shows the singer's daily life from shopping to recording sessions and gigs. All these as she struggles with a chronic illness. Here's a sneak peek.
What everyone thinks that I'm going to do, there really isn't anything bigger than this.
Now, Kapamilya star Angel Locsin and Kapuso primetime queen Marian Rivera tease what could be an upcoming project. Both played the role of Darna, and despite the network rivalry, Angel and Marian insist they're friends. In an Instagram post, Angel shared a behind-the-scenes photo of her and Marian with a caption, "Soon." And that got netizens talking. That's what's happening in the newsroom this Saturday, September 20.